Now I'm going to talk about 3 more types of government intervention which will actually address market failure, starting with direct government provision. Now when we talk about direct government provision, it is important to look at what is the type of direct government provision that we are talking about. So direct government provision can be what we call full and free provision. Now full and free provision is when the government provides for the good and also make it free of charge to consume. One example will be in the context of UK healthcare. So healthcare in the UK is free because the government feels that the benefits associated with the consumption and provision of healthcare far outweighs the cost. So that is full direct provision. There's also partial provision. Partial provision will be the government provides for the good but not free, it's heavily subsidized. Now, so that would be in the context of, say, for example, education and healthcare in Singapore. So you have government hospitals and government schools in Singapore that is directly provided for by the government, but they're not free of charge. They're just simply heavily subsidized. Now, the impact of direct free provision is that you also address the problem of income inequity and also address fully the problem of positive externalities. But you may end up actually causing overconsumption in the context of full direct provision. In the context of partial provision, what you're simply doing is that the government will actually provide for the good in order to provide extra players in the market, which will actually increase the supply of the good. By the government participating in the provision of the good, you are actually increasing significantly the supply of the good, which will lower both the price and increase the output for the good. So allowing the problem of underconsumption to be rectified by an increased output level. So that is for direct government provision. We can also look at the case of legislation as a means of government intervention. Legislation comes in the form of laws. Like for example, in Singapore, you have laws prohibiting the smoking of cigarettes in public places. So a law in Singapore prohibits smokers from smoking in public places because in public places, that is where there are many people that can be affected by the secondhand smoke. And remember, in the case of negative externalities, you have costs to third parties. So when there are many third parties, the cost will be more significant. So that's the reason why the government implements legislation to actually prevent smokers from smoking in public places to reduce the negative externalities. So legislation can be used as a means to reduce negative externalities or to force people to consume more goods that have positive externalities. So the thing about legislation is that legislation usually requires a lot of enforcement and a lot of monitoring costs, which can impose a cost to the government as well. And lastly, public education campaigns is one way that the government can actually address the problem of imperfect information. So how the government solves the problem of imperfect information is to try to bridge information gaps. So bridging information gaps can be done through, say, television programs. It can be done through social media, advertising on social media. It can be done through education in school. So through these public education campaigns, you can disseminate information to help people bridge the information gap that causes the divergence between perceived benefits and actual benefit, or the divergence between perceived costs and actual costs, by providing people with the correct information to bridge the information gap. So examples would be how frequently nearing to festive seasons, the government will actually post advertisements about the sugar consumption in various food types, okay, to try to educate the public about the detrimental impacts of consuming too much of a certain sweet food. Right, so that is an example of public education campaigns. Now, the problem with public education campaigns usually lie with the reach. Who are you reaching? Usually, the problem with trying to reach out to people involves groups who are less digitally literate. So sometimes, if you can't reach out to people who are not digitally literate, you have to find other means to engage them to actually provide this information spread.